So before we get started, I'm just going to go over some housekeeping really quick. So good afternoon and welcome to the eighth module for the CCI Clearance Preparedness Program. I appreciate your all's patience. The next module will be on October 1st from noon to 1. We will have a guest speaker who is Kevin Woods, and he is a director over at GuidePoint Security. You all have received calendar invites and you'll receive 3 reminders prior to the module. Please sign in to the Zoom modules with your first and last name. And um, if individuals who did not register and received links from friends will also not receive a badge because we don't have their emails and they did not complete the registration process. As always, please reach out to me if you have any questions regarding attendance and module logistics. I will turn this over to our special guest, Krystan Silva, Senior Technical Recruiter from AWS, to introduce herself. And thank you so much for being here, Krystan.
Hello, hello, and thank you for having me. Um, like Kendall said, I'm a senior technical recruiter at AWS. I have been with AWS for a little over 4.5 years now, but have spent the majority of my recruiting career in the cleared space. I have supported hiring for teams at a number of different government consulting firms, private tech companies that had government contracts, a little bit of everything in between as well. I've been a recruiter for about 20 years now and specialized in the government sector in tech since a long time ago, about 15 of those 20 years, we'll just say. I am very frequently looking for candidates that already have active clearances for a number of positions. But there's also opportunities that come up where we are able to sponsor a clearance from scratch as long as the candidate has eligibility. So the clearance world is something that you don't know about or don't know what questions to ask until you're trying to find a way in. And so I was hoping to use today to answer a lot of those types of questions for you all, because it's the government's process. There's no black and white document that says this is a go, this is a no go. But from working in this sector for as long as I have, I've seen what the general guidelines would equate to. So it's something that I can easily speak to without having it in writing. And so Kendall, and Sarah, it's up to you how we handle the questions. I know you had said for them to put questions in the chat,
Yeah,
which I can definitely keep an eye on as well. But
Krystan,
if anybody wanted to unmute themselves, to ask a question, I'm happy to just let the conversation flow naturally from there.
thanks, Kristen. The way Zoom webinar works, panelists have the ability to mute and chat or unmute and chat, but the attendees do not. So we have a
Okay.
Q&A box. I'll monitor the Q&A box and I'll, shout out any questions. Sometimes people ask kind of the same similar questions, so I'll try and make sure that we, get something, if it's kind of the same question over again, that we'll
Yeah.
get the answer. Um,
Yeah.
but if you wouldn't mind maybe starting out with a couple of maybe trends that you're seeing in hiring in the cleared space. We have seen, I think, a major shift in government hiring in general. And I just wonder if you could speak to what impact has that had on hiring in the cleared space that you've seen?
Sure. Sure. Great place to start. So, with the state of uh, things being decommissioned through Doge or just the new administration in general. One trend that we have experienced within the last several months is a larger number of people leaving direct federal employment and looking for work in the commercial sector. So that's been advantageous for AWS because number one, not a lot of people are super aware of how much work we have in the cleared space. And even from a more zoomed out perspective, there are a finite number of people that have these clearances currently. So there's only so many candidates that we can engage with. And so with the shift of the job market in the federal space, in terms of direct federal employment, that has started to beef up the candidate pool, if for lack of better words. It doesn't make my job any easier or harder because there's still technical competency and just kind of like the business ethics and principles alignment that we still need to be strong. It's not just we need somebody with a clearance and a pulse, but it at least has started to expand our network of potential candidates. We've also continued to grow our workload in the government space, which for certain capacities of different project teams gives us the leverage to get more engineers cleared. Or technical project managers, or I mean, there's a plethora of different technical roles that need you to be able to talk the talk, not necessarily write the code. And so, yeah, we just kind of go with the flow. The good thing is for us here at AWS, we have some like baseline clearance eligibility questionnaires that we have built and gotten approved through our legal team, where our security team reviews those responses and essentially gives the recruiter the green light, like, yes, they're eligible for a full scope polygraph with X, Y, and Z customers. And that's the green flag that we need to make sure that we're at least set up for success, even though ultimately the government runs their process the way they do. But we use those like generic guidelines to just make sure we're getting started on the right foot.
And I know you said that you've been with AWS for a portion of your career, but a lot of that career has still been in hiring in the cleared space.
Uh,
Most of the students here are going to be cybersecurity or cyber adjacent students. Can you talk a little bit about the different types of government customers that require a clearance in a
yeah,
cyber adjacent field? I think everyone can probably assume there's, the ones that we all think of, but maybe there's some
yeah.
that are just that we don't think about as frequently.
Yeah, absolutely. When working in the government space, or in any company where you have at least some level of your external customers being in the government space, it's the contracts that have been signed that indicate the clearance aspect of it. So it's not up to the individual company. Like it's not AWS saying like, hey, we need you to have a full scope. It's the work that you're doing. In order for us to do it, you have to have that clearance to get read onto that contract. So you'll see a variety of opportunities in your job search that will list in the requirements a minimum clearance level or the eligibility to obtain XYZ clearance level. That's pretty standard practice. They won't always be able to say outwardly, like, yes, we need a full scope polygraph or a CI polygraph level. It might just say polygraph because of the sensitivity of the customer. But it should be clear if it's a hard set requirement to start versus something we're going to get you in process for if you're selected for the role. And so these positions can exist at a number of different types of companies. A lot of what I did leading up to my time where I joined here was with smaller organizations that were government consulting firms. So think like a miniature version of like a Booz Allen or a Lockheed, SAIC. Those are three of the bigger names, by no means the only names. And so it will be very dependent on that project and if it needs access to a classified environment or if it just needs the clearance to get read onto all of the information you need to know to be productive on that work. On the flip side of that, since you mentioned everybody's in that cybersecurity space, I empower you all to start figuring out where you want to specialize because cybersecurity is just a loaded umbrella term, unfortunately. And so, as a recruiter, when I go to job fairs and people come up like, I'm in cybersecurity, what do you have for me? I'm like, well, yikes. Um, there is a layer of cybersecurity to absolutely everything we do in the cleared space. So, knowing where you want to fit that skill in, you're going to be able to touch the security elements, but maybe start focusing on building automations so that an application that currently is only available on the commercial side can get ramped up to speed to be launched in the classified space. And there's significant security components. There's a reason why we can't just flip a switch and bring every commercial service into our classified regions. They have to be very thoroughly reviewed and approved before they can go live in the cleared space. So this would cover everything from like cloud engineering, systems engineering, through layers of software and systems development as well. So there's so many different angles at which you could further develop your cybersecurity background. Does that
Yeah,
help clarify that a little bit?
I think so, very much so. I think that's great. It's yes, cybersecurity is a big umbrella term, and specializing in some aspect of it or in some kind of application of it, I think is great advice. Um, I have one more question before I get to one that's in the Q&A box. So I wanted to ask another kind of trend question in terms of the length of the duration to get a clearance. Have you seen any changes in, what can somebody expect who's never had a clearance before, who has been vetted to say, original vetting says, yep, this person looks like they would be eligible for a clearance. We're going to go ahead and move on with the hiring process to include starting that clearance process. What's the length of time someone can expect to look at before they actually have a clearance? And perhaps that depends on the level of clearance as well.
Yes, it does depend on the level of the clearance. Um, Anything like secret, top secret, or even TS with an SCI is going to come through quicker than anything with a polygraph component. Um, the government has a fun process where they are constantly reprioritizing. So I have seen people start from scratch to get a full scope polygraph level faster than somebody who already has a TSSCI who were just upgrading to a polygraph level because of where they prioritize their backlog.
Huh.
Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's like priority is to just work through the up level backlog. Another factor that goes into it is not necessarily your age, but age in terms of how much you've done in your life. Because some of the things that we know get reviewed are um, the locales where you have lived and worked. So they need, when they're doing like criminal aspect of their research, they're not just looking in the counties where you have had permanent residence, but they're also looking in the counties and states where you've had employment. And depending on the clearance level, sometimes it goes back 7 years, sometimes it goes back 10 years, sometimes it's from when you're 18 to now. And so if you're the type like me, where you moved around a lot, especially when you're first getting your career kicked off, like it just takes time to get through that information. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but somebody who has lived and worked in the same place for 25 years, it's just going to be a little bit of a smoother process for them. In general, for the highest level clearance, we've seen it come through in as quickly as 8 months, which was an anomaly. Um, and then as long as 3 years,
Goodness.
also an anomaly.
Yeah.
So on average, it's like between probably closer to the like 18-month mark.
Okay.
I'm not just taking that because it's like middle of the road there. It really is upwards of a year.
Yeah.
If you're starting from scratch, just because it takes a while. It's also not uncommon to not pass the polygraph, but be eligible to retake it.
Mm,
So that could elongate the process for you as well.
interesting. And so while that person is waiting on the clearance to come through, are they employed? Like what happens there?
Yeah,
What's it?
absolutely.
Maybe
So
they're in that gray area, right?
yeah. So if it's one of those roles where we had the green light to sponsor a clearance from scratch, that means the team has already predetermined that there is plenty of work to do that doesn't need the clearance yet.
Okay, good to know.
So knowing that it could take a couple years for it to come through, long-term strategy for sure.
They'll have some there. You won't just be sitting there twiddling thumbs and having coffee.
Never. No, well, at least not here at AWS. That's not how we do things. We'll find a way to keep you busy.
Good. A question from the Q&A box, which is related to the duration of how long does it take to get a process. The question really focuses on somebody who has had a clearance that has lapsed over time. Should that does a hiring manager look at that candidate more favorably rather than someone who has never had a clearance? Because the process presumably could go smoother.
Big picture, presumably could go smoother, could be easy to pick up where it left off, but an expired clearance is the same as not having a clearance. So there's no preferential treatment at the beginning stages. We would have you answer the same clearance assessment questionnaire, and as long as the eligibility is there, we would process you the same way, knowing that, hey, if this works out through the interview process, it might be quicker. But if there was an urgency to have that clearance right away, then we wouldn't be open to getting somebody cleared in the first place.
Um, Folks, feel free to put your questions into the Q&A box. I will read them as we get them while Krystan and I continue to chat about clearances. So the students that are attending have been listening to a couple of different modules, right, that have been talking about what the process is, the different levels of getting a secret clearance. What might impact somebody's eligibility for getting a clearance and what might not. So in your experience, could you maybe tell us a little bit of the things that you have seen of like, these are the kinds of things that I see over and over again hindering that process or enabling that process or stopping it altogether?
Yeah, absolutely. I can use just some like generalized things as well as some of my own experience from when I got a clearance, when I had to be, even though I was still in like a recruiting and project management perspective, I was sitting on site at a government customer facility. So I needed it for building access more so than like the actual work that I was doing. So I could speak to it as somebody who went through the process. Now, I didn't sit for the polygraph, so I only know hearsay for that. But when it comes to that, like baseline that we check to just make sure everything, like we're doing our due diligence, we're putting the right candidates forward in the interview process. Some of the things we ask about are use of illicit drugs, including marijuana, because federally it is not legal, even though it is, we do understand that it is legal in like a state by state situation, recreationally. If you're applying for a federal role, it's a no-go. So that's something that we would ask for. And then bigger scenario that tends to be a blocker for some of the clearances is any familial relationships with foreign nationals.
Mhm.
So if you are long distance dating somebody who's in a foreign country and a citizen of that country, that can be taken into account. If your aunt, uncle, grandparents, etc., still live overseas, um, that can be taken into account. For certain customers, um, it's not necessarily a stopping point. It's just a point that needs to be reviewed. Ultimately, it's the government's decision once again. But with certain customers, we know that as long as it's not on the short list of like red zone countries, that part's kind of public information, then we should be good to go. Whereas another primary government customer of ours, it's a stopping point.
Completely.
If any, so it doesn't matter what country, if you have dual citizenship or have any familial relationships with foreign nationals, it's not going to get approved.
Wow.
That's just one particular agency.
Right.
But yeah, so when we do that questionnaire, it's open-ended, not specific for one agency. And so they'll give me the security team will give me the results back saying like eligible for this one, but can only do up to this level with this customer,
Wow.
if that's the case. And so that seems to be the biggest blocker.
Hmm.
If we're just using trends in general.
Yeah.
Of course, criminal background is going to come up. That's not necessarily something we ask for on the front end, but it will be reviewed in the formal adjudication process. It's not that it has to be super squeaky clean. It just has to make sense, I guess. So, like, if you had something minor infraction of some sort 10 years ago and no repeated actions, they're not going to hold that against you the same way as if you had that same minor offense 6 times. Right?
Yeah.
Does that kind of put it in perspective? And so, and like, depending on the state, long time ago, just for funsies, I'll share this little anecdote. I lived in the Midwest I was specifically in Nebraska, and in Nebraska, it is a misdemeanor to not have your dog registered.
Oh, okay.
Where that's not a misdemeanor in most other states.
Yeah.
So like that was something I happened to see on some applications back in the day that I was like, oh, interesting thing to make sure I'm asking people about when it comes to the roles where that having a clean background is important. Because I had candidates that didn't realize it was listed as a misdemeanor. They just thought it was like a local infraction.
Something, yeah.
And so it's not just obviously anything to do with financial crimes is going to be a no-go with the government. Anything violent, no-go. But if it's like a minor parking ticket, that's probably not even going to come up. They're looking at like misdemeanor and higher type of things. But when it comes down to it, it's all about honesty.
Okay.
Not that you did or didn't have this experience in your background, but just that you were transparent about it from the get-go, so that the investigator that's assigned to you knows different angles that they need to research.
Yeah, I can imagine something like a DUI, maybe once in college, if you're upfront about it, might not be the worst thing in the world. That might not stop your crime.
Yeah,
If you have three since you've been, since you were in college and since then, right? Like that's repeated behavior.
exactly.
That's going to be, so even the same kind of, even an infraction that is perhaps a little bit more egregious, right, than not registering your dog, right? Like we know you're not supposed to drink and drive. But once you might get away with it, if that's repeated behavior, that's a pattern of behavior
Exactly.
the government
Yeah.
looks warily upon.
And I do know people that have openly shared with me that they had a DUI like years prior and it did not stop their clearance from getting approved.
Right.
But any sort of repeated behavior, that's that's just a rule of thumb for any type of company that's doing a generic background check for employment. It's more about the transparency than it is specifically what the infractions are, unless it's one that was repeated several times because that behavior was not corrected.
Yeah, and to your point, that's you're gonna go through a criminal background check for nearly any kind of employment at this point. So,
Hmm.
for professional employment. So, um, be aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, a question in the Q&A box. Is it better to apply to a regular job and then apply for a clearance or apply directly to jobs that require one? So I'm assuming this is if you don't have one.
If you don't have one and it's listed as a requirement, you might just be a glutton for punishment who wants to get a lot of rejection emails. Because if it's listed as a requirement and you don't have it, I can't do anything
Right.
about that. So what I recommend is looking for jobs that explicitly state that they're looking for somebody who has the eligibility to obtain said clearance.
Hmm.
And that is specific verbiage that we use across the board for all of our teams here at AWS. So, regardless of what clearance level we need you to obtain, the sentence utilizes the specific phrase of obtain and maintain across all of them. So, I actually recommend that candidates use that phrase, obtain and maintain, in quotations as the keyword search.
That is,
Instead of looking for a skill set or anything like that. If
yeah.
you just want to see what open positions allow for,
You do not have a clearance yet, but
mhm,
will it's a
yeah,
job that is going to start you on the clearance process because
mhm,
it requires one, but it's known, as you said, that this might take 18 months. The job is open today,
yeah,
and we know that it might take 18 months to get that clearance, but we're willing to, host that because it's got a sponsorship. And so
exactly,
that's the
exactly.
verbiage to look for.
Now, I would still recommend thoroughly reviewing every job description that comes up in that search because it might be that you need a top secret to start and the eligibility to get the upgrade.
Right.
There's no way to really filter that out because we can't have a specific clearance filter on our job board because it would just elude to too many of our
Government clients.
government customers. Yeah.
I see. Yes. Okay. That's too traceable. But excellent, excellent point, everybody. So key phrase here is obtain and maintain, and then look really closely at what they're saying when they say obtain and maintain. If it's obtain and maintain, your basic secret, then that is something that you might want to look for versus obtain and maintain top secret because, or with a polygraph because you've already got a secret clearance. So thank you for that. Okay, another question we got here. If you work in the Amazon warehouse, what would be the best way to transition into the technical field?
Great question. There are a number of ways. So depending on whether or not your role in a warehouse or distribution center has any technical alignment to it, it is what it is. Knowing that you're probably getting education outside and then you want to see how you can kind of segue once you obtain that degree or certification or something like that. There are a number of ways to transition into a technical role that could be the corporate route or although we still consider it corporate, the like infrastructure of our data centers could be a an environment where you may be able to kind of transition your foundational skills easily. But there are entry level corporate roles that sit in our regular corporate offices that could be a good segue for you as well. Even as an internal employee, you still want to make sure you're reviewing the basic qualifications or requirements of the role and make sure that you meet those and that your resume is reflective of that. Um, and then, yeah, then it's a pretty smooth process. As long as you meet the minimum requirements, then we can consider you just like we would an external candidate. But internal candidates have a little bit of an easier connection to the point of contact.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great, thank you. Okay, interesting question here. So, hello, with dual citizenship and a relative in Russia, does it make sense to apply for clearance? Or better, is it better to denounce Russian citizenship and bring the relative here to the US?
Cool. That sounds like just something that you would have to make that decision on yourself. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say you should change your whole life and your family's lives just to get a clearance. Unless you are super driven to want to work in the cleared space because of the mission of those operations, then it's not the end of the world if you decide to not work in the cleared space. Um, just like there are so many different companies, not every company or opportunity is going to be right for you and your family and everything else you have going on. So denouncing anything for the chance that you might get a clearance, I don't think I would take that risk.
Yeah, that's a really great point about kind of discernment, right? About whether or not a cleared space position is really what you want to get into. And I will say that there are, people who are very mission oriented and their personal mission aligns with the mission of a variety of different government agencies. And I think if that is the case for you, then you know, that is a great space for you. And I think it's wonderful if that's what you want to go and do. A cleared space is not for everybody, and that's okay too, right? You can
Yeah.
still do a lot. You can still do a lot in cybersecurity. You can still work tangentially to the government uh,
Yeah.
without a clearance. And so while, obviously this is the Clearance Preparedness Program, and we're here to talk about, the clearance process. Well, again, we're here to demystify what that process looks like, right? To
Mm-hmm.
questions. And I think, I hope that when we have answers to these questions and we didn't demystify this process, it does make it easier to discern whether or not this is something that somebody wants to go towards, for their profession. Um, I always tell this story that my dad was in government service for a long time. He was in the US Army, and then he was a federal employee. And so when I left for college, he showed me his pink slip of his SF-86 and said, "This is what it looks like. These are the questions that you might have to answer." And I went to school before Facebook, so I'm dating myself here, but it was a little bit easier at the time, right? The questions that we might have had to answer. But the lesson was, keep in mind that these are only opportunities if you want them to be. And you can either close the door on those opportunities by some of your actions and your behaviors, or you can continue to keep them open, but they're not doors that you have to walk through if you don't want to. And so I think that that's a really important point, that, I think this question kind of lends itself to, right? Is, make sure you fully understand what you're potentially getting yourself into, and the impact that it would have on your family, right? So let's say that there's no need to denounce anything, but you're an American citizen, you have no familial ties outside of the United States, and you decide that you want to go and work somewhere where you need a top secret with a polygraph. That could also still impact your family and your family life, right? And your future career. So all big things to consider. So thank you for that. Do you have any other questions? That person's looking.
Awesome. Yeah. And to just kind of like circle back on one of the points you made, we have several teams that are adjacent to our cleared space that you just need to be a citizen to support because of the sensitivity of the interaction with the cleared teams, not because of a contract you have to get read onto. So you can still be adjacent to some of these missions from a bigger behind the scenes perspective. So just take in like the infrastructure of the cloud environment for AWS. I'm not talking physical infrastructure, data center stuff. I'm talking about like what makes it all come together, right? So we have teams that are focused on region build engineering. That's the group that stands up new regions across the globe, commercial and cleared. But what's cleared about the cleared regions are the services that are enabled within it, not what it takes to get it stood up, like from the engineering perspective. And so all of those region build engineering teams are examples of ones where you just have to be a US person, because it's kind of the framework that enables the other teams to be able to do what they do for those particular government customers in those regions.
Good point. All right. Are there any other questions from attendees? Not this time, it doesn't look like. Okay. Krystan, what else are we seeing in the clear technical space that we should be aware of? What's I love the notion of what's focus on something, right? Like what do you want to focus on? Find something that you want to focus on. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. Like what are maybe some trends that you're seeing there? Like what's where are we seeing a lot of job openings in kind of a specific area of cybersecurity, if there are any?
Yeah, oh, for sure. What we see generally that although it might change from like one team to the next, I would say some of the what we refer to in recruiting as evergreen roles that we always are going to need candidates for, regardless of where we need to place them. It's the whole spectrum of engineering opportunities. So that could be uh, from like a systems analyst, systems engineering type, um, not not necessarily in like a help desk sense of systems engineering, but if I had to equate it to help desk, maybe like tier three, um, and higher. And then for my teams that are in the cleared space, kind of we have some unique terminology that we use. So we call them dedicated cloud engineers, because the dedicated cloud is Amazon's cleared space. And so as a dedicated cloud engineer, this is essentially a cloud systems engineer role. But we also have systems development engineering, software development engineering, um, security engineering, where you get kind of like even further specialized in certain aspects. And then there are also a number of roles that perhaps are on the professional services side of the business where you need to have the technical know-how of how things work, but you're the person helping the customers. So it's much more customer facing than it is hands-on keyboard scripting or coding. But you have to have the technical chops as a baseline so that we know that you'll be able to communicate appropriately, not just with the customer, but also with the engineering teams that have to go and make those changes.
They always need a project manager who can explain everything to everybody, right?
Mhm.
Or that communication of that is actually an incredibly important skill.
Yeah. Yeah. And being able to change the level of communication based on your audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very different talking to a director, or C-suite, government C-suite than to the other software engineers. Another question we have. Right now I'm doing a marketing internship for a cybersecurity company through a CC program. I'm majoring in business marketing. What program would be aligned with my major in cybersecurity?
So I'm making sure that I'm understanding the question. Do you have a dual major with business marketing and cybersecurity? Or are you doing two separate programs? If you could clarify that, that might help me make sure that I'm answering your question. But having a background on the business side of things definitely is still a way to get into the cybersecurity space because just like our example here, he happens to be doing that work at a cybersecurity company. So if that's an area of interest and passion for you, and you just want to be around the technology, you don't want to build the technology, that's a way to get in. So similar to myself, my background is in HR. I studied HR, my degree's in HR. I ended up specializing in recruiting, and then I fell into technical recruiting and was like, this is it. Like, it makes my heart beat in the morning. I enjoy talking to engineering candidates and people with really unique backgrounds that have built some really incredible
And
projects and solutions.
it wound up leading to you getting a clearance at one point because of the nature of the work and where you were going to be doing that work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think thank you. That's a great lesson and reminder in, you know, where you want to be in 20 years is, take the first step to get there, right? You don't have to have all the steps laid out to get to where you want to be in 20 years because that could shift. It could
And
be
it will.
uncharted.
Whether you
right
believe
now.
that now or not,
Right.
it will.
You don't need, I'm sure, right, 20 years ago, you didn't know that this is what you would be doing.
Never. I would have never guessed.
Right.
Um, Personally, as a first generation college graduate, I didn't have a path to follow. I had a couple cousins, but they were like in finance, and another one was a music major for vocals. She got a full ride, so good on her. But like, I didn't have family members to see like, oh, there's a way into like nobody else in my family's in tech. And so had I known then what I know now, I probably would have become an engineer because I think the way my brain works, it would have worked out nicely for me. But I found my way to a focus area that I'm passionate about by changing jobs and just letting it happen. So one thing I like to give candidates earlier in their career or at the point of a career shift, because I know there's more and more non-traditional students every day, is that your no job or your next job is a death sentence. You are allowed to change your mind. And so people get so in the weeds with overthinking, like, is this the right job for me to apply to? Never mind, get through the interview process and accept that, like, you're allowed to change your mind if it doesn't work out for you. But it could also open doors to other teams that you wouldn't have otherwise discovered. There's always something to learn from a job, even if it's one that you end up not enjoying. You figure out what doesn't work for you. And that has happened to me personally several times in my career.
Absolutely. And that too, as you said, there's nothing wrong with changing your mind. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I learned something from this and it's not for me. And I've been here for 2 years and I'm ready to move on to something, or I've been here for 3 years and I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And I'll take something with me and move on to the next thing. And it's maybe it gets you closer to where you think you want to get to, right? But
Hmm.
and maybe, there's things to take along the way there. So I started my career in academia and I was going to go get a doctorate and teach. And I wound up leaving academia. I was in federal consulting, in a cleared space and all of the things. And I fell more into project management, right, than anything super technical. But along the way, it allowed me to learn a lot from engineers, right, to pick up certifications, to pick up an extra degree, all of the things along the way that made each shift and each change a little bit easier, right? And now I'm back in academia and I'm not teaching, but I am back in academia. And so you just never know where life is going to take you. And so it's just the, you know, like that song from Frozen 2. It's the first next step.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fun.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. From the attendees, are there any other questions? If not, I'm going to ask Kristen to give us her final thoughts and final piece of advice for the afternoon. And then I will hand it over to Kendall in case she has any more housekeeping, and we're going to wrap up. So I don't see any more questions. Kristen, final thoughts from you.
Final thoughts. Um, I'm an advocate for the candidates. So when I say things like I did earlier about being a glutton for punishment because you didn't read the requirements, I'm making light of a situation, but being on the job market is stressful. We understand that. So don't make it harder on yourself than you need to. So by just taking a couple extra minutes to make sure that you meet all of those requirements listed in that job description and that it's reflected in your resume, not just that you know up here that you meet it, you're at least getting yourself started on the right page. There are lots of opportunities also once you're in a company to see how you might be able to segue into the cleared space
Mhm.
because there is a lot of area where, like, let's say you come in as a software engineer on a cleared team or on a commercial team, but you want to get in to the cleared space. There, very frequently, we will try to find internal candidates before a job gets published externally.
Mm.
Um, Especially in that clearable sense, because we know the engineers that are already here are performing at the right level and are aligned with our core values that
That
we
makes
just need to get them over the hurdle, right?
right.
And so, commercial roles are not the end of the world. And there could still be very critical projects that you get to work on that open those pathways to just like the cross team collaboration, where you end up uncovering opportunities that you wouldn't have even known to look for in your job search before that. And so, yeah, trust that recruiters are here to support you through the whole process, not just to check boxes on a list and move your resume forward. And so hopefully you have uh, great experiences with the recruiters that you'll encounter throughout your career search. But yeah, I'm here for my candidates. You are my customers.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon, for sharing your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you, all attendees. Kendall, do you have any final housekeeping that we need to cover?
No, just a reminder to everybody that the next session will be on October 1st from noon to 1, and we will see you all there. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Kristen. We really appreciate this. I know this is your second time joining us, and
Yeah,
it's just an applause to you about how great your sessions are. So we really appreciate your time.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
best of luck to everyone. Have a
Thanks.
great day.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.